We did get tons of rain, though, over the last several days, and that got us thinking about a modern marvel of sorts built by the city of Portland by ratepayers to help handle all that rain. It's called the Big Pipe Project. It was built over 20 years. They significantly changed, in a good way, what happens to the Willamette River when it rains that hard. And that's our big story tonight. This week when it poured rain, we heard about something that's a bit unusual these days, a combined sewer overflow in Portland. Now that happens when there's simply too much water and sewage in the system, and yeah, I know it's gross to think about, but a bunch of the sewage and all that water just flows directly into the Willamette River. It used to happen all the time, something like 55 times a year. In fact, when I got here in 1990, most folks would never dare to swim in the polluted Willamette River. But that has all changed in a very big way, and it's thanks to the Big Pipe Project. Let's take a look at how that happened. Portland's first sewage treatment plant opened back in 1952. Back then, the city had a combined sewer system. That means that sewage, shown here in green, combined with stormwater, in blue, in the exact same pipes. During relatively dry weather, it worked pretty well. The network of pipes collected both rainwater and sewage and sent both to the treatment plant. But the problems began anytime it rained hard. All that runoff from the streets and roofs and parking lots would drain into the combined system and overwhelm it, overflowing into what are basically escape pipes that shoot directly out into the Willamette River. The city says overflows are about 80% stormwater and 20% sewage from your bathroom. That's not good. The sewage has E. coli bacteria, which is bad for humans and the environment. And that overflow happened on average 50 times a year, spewing 6 billion gallons of liquid out into the Willamette River and the Willamette Slough. So in 1991, the city and Oregon's Department of Environmental Quality entered into a legal agreement forcing the city to fix the problem. And then it was time for action. First, Portland started a campaign to cut the amount of stormwater going into the sewers. It also planned to build massive pipes on either side of the Willamette that would hold all that extra water during the storms and pump it to the sewage plant as fast as possible. The city eventually convinced people on the east side to disconnect 56,000 downspouts, which put water into yards instead of the sewer system, and it kept an estimated billion gallons out of the system. Then it was time to build the massive pipes. The first construction project focused on the Columbia Slough. A pipe 6 to 12 feet in diameter and 3.5 miles long was built. It was put in next to the slough to capture combined sewer overflows there. And it works. The city reports it stops 99% of the overflows. Another part of the work expanded the sewage treatment plant so that it could handle all that extra flow. The next project would be building the huge pipe on Portland's west side. It was much more complicated. 2 massive boring machines, and yes, Lewis and Clark are the names they gave them. Well, those machines went to work. One tunneled north, the other tunneled south. They worked 120 feet below the surface. They cut a tunnel 14 feet in diameter and 3.5 miles long. It runs along the Willamette's west bank and under the river to Swan Island on the east side. Now, you might be thinking, well, that would take the big pipe under most of our bridges. And yes, you are correct. It also runs under the waterfront park. Crews injected concrete into the ground to protect against settlement as the boring machine passed underneath the bridges. The machines were big. Those big circles at the front, they're called cutting heads. They were 16 feet in diameter. As they tunneled along, chewing through dirt and rock, it was carried out the back end and then to the surface and later barged upriver to help restore Ross Island Lagoon. As it advanced, hydraulic arms behind that cutter head installed precast steel reinforced segments to create those tunnel rings. To give you an idea of how big it is, a Greyhound bus would fit inside easily with room to spare. All the water and sewage collected by the West Side pipe needs to go somewhere, so contractors built a huge pump station on Swan Island to move everything along to the main sewage treatment plant. That pump station is 123 feet in diameter and 160 feet deep. That's big enough for a 15-story building. During wet weather like we had this week, it can move 100 million gallons of combined water and sewage every day. After the west side was finished, work on the east side pipe began. It's 22 feet in diameter, nearly 6 miles long. Everything is big. This pipe is tall enough for a giraffe to stand with no problem. Construction methods were similar to the west side, except one really big machine, the yellow one there, was used to dig the tunnel. It had to alter its course a time or two to avoid freeway bridge footings on the east side. But the city says super accurate laser guidance systems led the machine to within 1 inch of its final intended target. How about that? Pretty cool, huh? So now you understand how all that works. You can see why those combined overflows are way less common these days. But they do still happen, but nowhere like they used to. Those massive tunnels on either side of the river, they collect and they hold all that extra water and sewage. Imagine that being completely full. And by the way, the city tracks and posts what's happening in those tunnels. Here's a graph showing the latest overflow. When the line goes up and hits 100%, that means the enormous tunnels are completely full, cannot hold any more sewage, and the rainwater and sewage is now going straight into the Willamette. That latest overflow started around 7 a.m. on Wednesday, December 6th, and lasted until about 1 o'clock, and then it started to drift back down. Now, this chart is updated every 15 minutes, and it shows that the tunnels now are nearly empty, just 1% filled with liquids. You can find this, by the way, by Googling Big Pipe. Finally, the big pipes were definitely long-term projects. Actual construction went from the year 2000 through 2011, and the total cost, roughly $1.4 billion. Now let's bring in our expert, meteorologist Matt Zaffino, to talk about how much rain it takes to cause these overflows. And I know you have numbers from 2 other times that it's happened this year, Matt.
Yeah, that's right, Pat. I wanted to look back at a couple of these because a sample size of 1, and this most recent one, I'm not surprised that we had the combined sewage overflow with the amount of rain that we had this week. So I looked at 3 events. The most recent, of course, December 6th and 7th. Actually, it's the 5th and the 6th. I looked at the day before the CSO and the day itself. So it's the 5th and the 6th. Here in downtown Portland, over 3 inches of rain. Same thing out at the airport. So when we get that kind of rainfall, I'm not surprised that even the big pipes overflow. That's a lot of water over, the entire Portland area. And we're going to talk about how many gallons that is a little bit later, Pat, I believe. So yeah, that's big. So let's look back at another one. This one was a little bit of a head scratcher. I remember when it happened back in May, the 7th and 8th. We only had 63/100ths of an inch of rain downtown, and the airport only had 1/4 of an inch of rain. I think part of the system might have been down for maintenance or something at that point, because this type of rainfall is, really pedestrian and wouldn't normally cause an overflow. So I'm not sure what happened with that one. Then the other one this year was back in March, and this was significant rainfall too. Over the 2-day period, the 12th and the 13th, over 1.5 inches of rain in Portland, and about the same out of the Portland airport. So usually it takes rainfall in 24 hours of over 1 inch, 1.5 inches to really trigger the CSO. And just to give you some more rainfall numbers, Pat, because it's so interesting what we did this week. I added up all the rainfall for these sites from the 1st through the 6th. 2 feet of rain on the south side of Mount St. Helens at Swift Creek. In the Bull Run, 16 inches of rain. That's helping our water supply, of course. Nehalem River and the Coast Range. Vancouver had over 8 inches of rain, and the airport 5.5 inches of rain. So not surprising that we had a CSO in spite of the big pipe, but boy, what a great job it does.
Oh my gosh. And I read somewhere that there could have been up to 1 trillion or maybe 3 trillion, I forget, gallons of water dumped on Oregon and Washington between those days.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised by that number, because if you think about it, you look at some of these rainfall amounts. Let's just take, one in the middle, say in the Nehalem River, 15 inches of water over a huge area, say tens of square miles or hundreds of square miles. That adds up to a lot of gallons. And remember, this is all due to the atmospheric rivers that we had. And we had 3 in a row, basically, from Friday through early this week. Now, the average atmospheric river has about as much moisture, water vapor, as the Mississippi River holds at any one time. Strong atmospheric rivers can have 15 times the amount of water that's in the Mississippi River.
Wow.
And we had some strong atmospheric rivers. So trillions of gallons, that is totally feasible.
And then there's one more storm coming at us. Do you think that's going to cause a CSO?
Well, as a matter of fact, I've got a graphic for you on that as well, Pat. Let's look at the rainfall that's coming at us, and it is going to add up Saturday and Sunday to 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches in the valleys, 3 inches in the Cascade foothills and at the coast. So I'm glad those pipes are empty right now, like you showed us and told us, because there's a lot of water coming our way, and those amounts, they can trigger a CSO. So we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Wow. All right. Thank you, Matt. Fascinating as always.
You bet.